Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 11th Sustainability Working Group meeting. I'd like to start off with a territorial acknowledgement. Leslie, would you like to read that for us, please?
Sure. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Leslie. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
None.
Seeing none. Okay, so review of the previous meeting minutes. Are any issues with the minutes that were circulated?
None.
Okay, can I have someone move that? Moved by Leslie, seconded by John. All in favor? And that's carried. Oh, and sorry for the viewers online. I'd like to mention also we do have another committee member who is on via phone, so you won't see him around your screen. Dean is on the line.
But my hand was raised to approve the minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Dean. All right, so we'll move on to our first agenda item, or our only agenda item at this point, the Sustainability Working Group Annual Report to Council. So every year we do have the annual report that goes to Council, and it typically coincides with the annual presentation from Sustainable Waterloo Region by Tova, the Executive Director. She should be in attendance at some point this morning. So at this point, I'd like to discuss with the committee members. I do have a list here of items that we'll typically include as part of past achievements and updates we'd like to provide to Council of successes and items that have occurred through the past year subsequent to the last report. So I'll start off with some of my general couple of things, and then I'll pass it off to the committee if there's other suggestions that we should include in the report as part of our story to Council. So they're not in any particular order. I did go through the couple of the minutes since the last annual report to kind of prompt some ideas. But so I'll, again, not any particular order. So we did have the carpool parking that was approved by Council, and I believe recently installed at the Wilmot Rec Complex, Kirkpatrick Park, and the New Dundee Community Center. We had Earth Day, that community-wide cleanup initiative, and also the support of the rain barrel program by the local community group. We had a finalization of our HVAC project at the administration complex. So that's been a big undertaking, hopefully to see some savings through that initiative. Progression on the Mike Scouts wetlands, although not particularly, looked after by the committee, but just looking at the township as a whole. There's been Molochs installed at various parks. So through that, we'll save some emissions as far as staff having to drive and empty recycling bins. And so we'll see some positive returns on that. The tree canopy policy project was included in the capital budget. I don't have an update per se on the actual project itself, but as Harold's not in attendance, but that the funding is set aside, and I believe there's to be a progression on that initiative.
I can just mention, Ashton, that the group is meeting for the first time next week to kick that off.
Excellent, that's great to hear. We had the resource included in the budget for the sustainability coordinator, so there's been support for that. The charging stations were installed, and I think they're fully operational for quite some time now, since January, February. And then we also have our greenhouse gas review that the committee looked at a few months ago. So that's the kind of the running list I've had for now, and kind of the key items that I think we'll kind of include in the report. I guess I'll open it to the committee now, that if there are any other suggestions that we should bring forward to Council as far as the update is.
Ashton, do we have monitoring of the charging stations to see what use they have been getting?
Yep. Yeah, we absolutely do. We have information on that regard. That might not be a bad idea. It wouldn't be much information as I do in launch off, but we do definitely have data.
Okay.
I can certainly look into maybe including some of that.
Okay. And that I missed the last meeting, and in the minutes there, I saw you have in the greenhouse gas emissions by facility. Is there a report or like a graph or something on that to show the usage with the township facilities? Is that what you had last meeting? Because I missed it.
Yeah, that's actually a while ago. Yes, I think I definitely broke it down by facility. Because I recall you mentioning that. So we brought it forward. I can circulate you the documents after the meeting.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically in the annual report we provide the just the aggregate consumption. Right. I can see if it can be a way, perhaps, or if the committee, would like to see it breaking it down by facility. But I don't want to need to paint a little bit of a story. We don't want to confuse council with all that stuff. But yeah. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just going to say, like, if you had it, that's fine. I didn't know if that was something you already had. And when was the last update we had for the overall goals as far as our reduction by 2027? Isn't it?
Yes.
For that.
So every year we do the update as part of the annual report. We'll report on our last year's worth of emissions. So this report
when do we typically do that?
It'll be typically, we send the annual reports typically in June, and it coincides with Tova's presentation, but she didn't have her presentation in this June due to other issues. So she's coming in September. So we're going to coincide our annual report at that time.
Well, that's coming up then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Ashton, what's the date for that September meeting?
I believe the meeting is scheduled to be on September 12th. I have to let me pull up the date, unless Councillor Fenning or anyone else knows it off the top of their head. It's the 12th or the 19th. My apologies. I should have that date.
May 12th was the last meeting.
Oh, the last meeting for the committee, but the upcoming council meeting.
The 22nd, August 22nd is the next council meeting.
Yes, but sorry for the timing for this report. Tova's presentations in September. My apologies.
Oh, in September. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
September 12th would be the report from the sustainability working group.
September 12th. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed a word there.
Okay. Anything else, John?
No.
Okay. Councillor Penny?
A couple things I noted. I didn't realize until I opened the documents that both of them, the title says, like in the document, it's all fine, but the tab says September 7th, 1999. Pretty sure that's not when our last meeting was. And it's also not the date of today's meeting.
Okay, I'll look and get those corrected.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know why that is. That's any document that's made within the township seems to be, it always says September 7th, 1999. I currently have, both those, but I make a couple of PDFs and they always say that. I don't know why. It's not just these two. So we can ask IT about that, but yeah.
So for anybody out there that's opened them and is confused or,
Sure.
So this is an annual report, which means the last one happened before October. So maybe we want to mention no waste October.
Zero waste. Okay. Zero waste month.
Zero waste. That's the word I was looking for. Zero waste.
Got that. All right.
I was reading through things here and saw the no mo stuck in my head.
Yeah. Oh, I have a comment on the no mow May. I could do that, but somebody's going to have to bring a swather to cut my grass in June then, because I'm not going to be able to cut it.
You might have a neighbor or two who might have one.
Yeah, I'll get Eck to come over and do it, Jen.
Just get some sheep.
Yeah.
Hey, are there any other comments on the annual report? Okay, so once that report's drafted and reviewed, I'll certainly circulate it with the committee, and you'll see that also included in the agenda package for the September 12th meeting. Okay,
Great.
so that brings us as far as listed agenda items. So we'll move on to other business. I'll open it to the round table first, and then I do have some thought. Dean had mentioned as far as planning, perhaps at the next meeting. Or sorry, we can start off with that. As far as a roadmap as we move forward, because the agenda today is pretty light, but I guess picking up some of the things we've discussed previously in the year, such as the waste initiative as being one example of them. Anyone have any thoughts, or Dean, if you wanted to add to your suggestion there?
Yeah, no, I would just, and I apologize, I don't know how well I'm coming through. I'm out over to Pinery, and the cell signal here is not the strongest, so hopefully you can
loud and clear,
hear me okay. All right. No, I had just suggested to Ashton that perhaps we might want to treat September as kind of a little bit of a starting a new year of the fall and winter, and use it as a time to sort of map out what might we like to take on or to accomplish over the next 10 months or so.
Are there any?
I was going to say.
Sorry, go ahead, Leslie. I
was going to say that I agree with that, because just like Councillor Fenning had mentioned that Zero Waste Month's coming up, but like we had talked about getting our ducks in a row for Earth Week next year. If there's anybody or any community programs we need to reach out to before then, we should do that earlier rather than later, instead of like the week before. So I really like this idea. It's a really good idea.
Okay.
Are there any items, action items, I guess, going forward that need priority? I guess I'm asking the group on that, that we should tend to, and kind of set a little bit of structure to it, maybe that way as well.
Right, and that's a good point. I think we can leave that for that meeting, and we can come forward with the priorities, and then we can establish the roadmap surrounding them and prioritize them, obviously.
Yeah.
Councillor Fenning?
I think that's a great idea. One thing we will need to keep in mind is that, well, two things actually, that there's a process being undertaken to review all the terms of reference for all the committees. I don't expect that will negatively impact anything, but also being aware that with the new term of council, there will be a new term of the committee as well. And so, not everyone who's currently sitting here might be sitting here after that happens. Again, doesn't mean that we don't undertake the work. I think it just means that we need to sort of build in some expectation that there's going to be further input required later on.
Absolutely, good point. Okay, so that was, I guess, Dean's update and then kind of mine. So I'd like to open it up to the floor, I guess, for any other topics of discussion. Councillor Fenning?
So I've been a couple different things. There are some community groups working on green building standards. And I know that they're talking to the planning department. Unfortunately, the director's away on holidays right now. And I wasn't able to connect with the planning department to get more information or, sort of talk about some details. But I've been thinking about how we as a committee could potentially ask council to endorse a motion that would put a lens on decision making that takes into account our greenhouse gas emissions and environmental impact for a variety of decisions, but specifically in the zone change applications and development applications, those have very significant impacts on what kind of activities are occurring in our community. And, depending on how those go or what is decided, how things are built, what types of new activities happen on a property, can either increase or decrease our impact on the environment in a variety of ways. And the challenge is ensuring that we write the language in a way that is consistent with the existing ability we have to control what happens in our community, because we don't have full control. We can't just, sort of be arbitrary about things. We don't get to just fully say, we're just not going to accept this kind of thing. We do have to abide by the rules. So that's where I need the expertise of our planning department to ensure that, we get the right kind of language. But in the absence of having that, I thought I would bring it up as an idea to the rest of the committee to see what your perspective is on it. And if that's something that we might want to engage in over the next couple meetings as a committee.
Okay.
Sorry, I was late. One of the things I've seen other municipalities, not even necessarily in the region do, but I've seen other municipalities do, is to add an element to reports to council, that usually there's a bit of a template for those reports to council from staff, and they add a line that has a anticipated greenhouse gas impact of the project or the recommendation, as well as it might say unknown, but it at least then raises the question and adds the lens to the decision making. It could be a sustainability impact, but that becomes a little more nebulous if people don't understand what do you mean. Like if you're in the finance world, that's a whole different context. So just thinking about that being a kind of a nice lever and mechanism to keep it top of mind. And that means that every report that goes to council, not just things like buildings, every report that goes to council, they have to consider, okay, wait, we passed X strategy, we've adopted this target. Is this in line? And if it isn't, then they are consciously making the decision to move away from what that intention is. And it at least opens the conversation. So just a thought as a mechanism to allow for that.
So it's like almost in every report to council, it says this fits the official plan. So does this fit the sustainability plan, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, like right now there's, you have to put in the financials. Every report must have a financials. And then this is like, so what is the financial? Does it fit with the plan? And is it fit with our sustainability goals? So it adds that lens. It's a bigger thing to undertake because it's changing how that whole report goes, but it would, if it's put in place, it's kind of a cool way of doing
Yeah.
it.
Councillor Penning?
I'm interested. I think that has merit, but I'm not the one writing the reports. So if it's not putting you on the spot too much, maybe the staff members can weigh in on how they feel about including that. And maybe sustainability isn't the word, GHG and environmental impacts. Or natural environment impacts, or maybe that's a terminology that we sort of work on a bit.
Yeah, and the thing, sorry, I just jumped in. I know I'm supposed to raise my hand. The challenge that it potentially brings is that a lot of people will say, I don't know the GHG impact. We don't have the measurement. And so I can see why like that language is kind of important, because we don't want it to just be like, oh, it's fine. but we also don't want such an arduous measurement number where the finance one, like there's a budget, and so that those numbers are predetermined. It'd be great if we could actually do that measurement and calculation, but I don't think the infrastructure and the data is there to support that kind of GHG language. So yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking as we're going here. So let's say somebody's doing some sort of development in the township somewhere, and how does one? Okay, let me back up a bit because my brain's thinking faster than I'm talking. How do we get the measurements? I know I think we explained this before. How are we getting the measurements, say, for the rec center, as far as the greenhouse gas reduction of what we've done and what it's proven to be? What does it take someone like that, and how difficult is that going to be, say, for someone doing some sort of development in the township to give that kind of report, what the greenhouse gas reduction is going to be, because they're using geothermal or they're using solar or whatever the case may be. How does one get that report like this? I think it's something kind of new. And is it going to be just, somebody developing that's going to say, I don't know how to do that, so I guess I'm not going to do it. We can't have it. So it's going to be a deterrent either, I suppose, right?
Yeah, and I'd add to that, as far as to answer your first question, as far as how it's tracked at the rec complex, be an example. We have scoped emissions that are tracked. So, for example, fuel, natural gas, electricity are the core ones we receive. And then I think we run into, I go a little bit gray in the area as far as we're looking at development committees. It's not really my area of expertise. But again, where does the scope stop? Are we looking at emissions of vehicles or other factors, tree canopy, all of that? It's questions to be answered, I guess. But Tova, go ahead.
It is tricky. It is tricky to do that. There can be, for things like a building, if you have energy modeling for a building and it's intended in X style, it would be like with a traditional high efficiency HVAC system, it would be this much natural gas. If the emission factor of natural gas is X, which you can find out, it's really not that difficult. You then can actually say it would be this much, where if you have geothermal, then you don't have the natural gas that uses some electricity. So you can actually do that calculation. And in theory, the township could create like an Excel thing where it's like, if it uses this much natural gas, it's this much. And if it uses this much electricity, it's this much. And this much gasoline is this much. Those ones are simple. To some of the stuff that Ashton was raising, things like carbon accounting for sequestration from trees, like the experts in trees and forestation will tell you there is no standard way of doing it, because it depends on the ground that it's on and how quickly the tree grows and whether it's got a dormant period or not. And like, it is not something that's as simple as something like a building. And then, are you requiring scope 3 emissions for transportation to and from and the location you've chosen? And what about the added infrastructure that you have to build? It's quite complicated to get to some of it. So that GHG accounting one might be difficult. If it were to some of the language that Councillor Fenning used on the idea of what are the environmental and climate change impacts or something like that, it could then be a little less qualitative or less quantitative and more qualitative. It would be, added transportation to and from the site using sustainable HVAC systems, reduced energy or reduced GHGs from fuel switching from natural gas or fossil fuels to electricity. So it could be something that we could make it a little more accessible to do, but to keep the lens in the reports.
Councillor Fenning?
So, yeah, I certainly don't want to create something that's going to just make everybody go, forget it, because that's not productive either, right? And if we make it too difficult to engage with, people just don't, right? Mostly, what my goal in it is to have that trigger for speaking about it, for contemplating it, for being conscious in the decision making. You know, this is going to negatively impact the environment. Okay, so that doesn't, either we have to do it, and so we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that impact, or how can we modify this decision, modify this project? What can be done to reduce that impact? And if we can't really reduce that impact, but we've recognized that there's an other value to the project, what can we do? What other projects can we undertake that are going to offset? Because, you know, I drive a car. I drive down the road with my gas car. I'm still waiting for an electric. I've ordered one, but it's, you know, God knows when it's going to be available. So I have to get certain places. I can't bike everywhere. I can't, you know, I have a 0.5 kilometer driveway, and then I have to get to town to do anything, get anything. So those are realities of my life that I try to offset with other positive actions that productively, you know, support environmental health around me. And so that's, you know, kind of how I view it as the township, and from in my role as counselor. When I'm looking at something, it's not, okay, this is going to be a bad impact here, so we just don't do it. It's okay, if it's going to be a bad impact, how do we offset it? Or is there a value that means that it's worth that negative impact?
Leslie?
I'm going to unmute. I had a question about whether or not the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which it appears have to be on our staff reports now, is that too broad of a way? Like if someone, because I think you wanted to do this for applications for zoning development applications, is it then too broad to say how these affect these goals, since you've asked staff, council has asked staff to put these in our reports? Like, is that just too broad, or is it, you know, I just wanted to know.
I can answer what I'm assuming that question is directly what I'm trying to achieve with this. I think that the sustainability goals are really great, and I certainly was part of asking for those to be included in the reports. But I think that they are perhaps not being used to their greatest effect. And I don't mean that in a sense of like, oh, you're doing a bad job. I mean that we as council, and, you know, it's not, that mechanism is not achieving currently what I would hope to get out of this. And perhaps that means that we simply need to use that differently. So maybe that is the right answer, Leslie. And maybe, you know, we look at that and build a motion or a statement of creating or more consciously using that lens in decision making, and that we have to more fully discuss that impact and how, you know, it is positive or negative. So I think right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, because what I have observed on reports is that they are saying this meets this, you know, project or purchase or whatever meets these goals. But it doesn't ever say it is negatively impacting this goal, or, you know, which, I mean, that could get tricky too. So that's a whole other, but how can we perhaps use them better? And, you know, that's something I would need to rely on staff to suggest, because, you know, you're the ones who are working with it and producing those reports.
Yeah. I have to create one for my asset management plan that's going to council. And it was the first time I saw it was in this report template that we have to use, Describe. And I had never heard of them before. So if that's something that you want to use, I think it does require a little bit more of culture shift, right? That's like, these are learning about them, what the impact of each one of those are. Because yes, exactly. I was like, I think my asset management plan goes to like this climate change one and like whatever. So like, I really had to think about it, but whether or not it's actually doing what you're hoping it, I don't think it's there yet. But again, it's a culture change, I think, that's needed. So yeah.
All right, we'll go to John and then Tova.
Well, I guess getting back to Jen's comments and everything there too, the one thing that comes up for me, if I'm going to be doing a project and, you know, we need to implement sustainability into it, I'm kind of thinking, I'm not a developer, but from a developer standpoint, is what's going to incentivize me to do it? If there are incentives to do it, then I'm more apt to be doing it as well. And this is where we need to look with, you know, not only the township, but also the other levels of government in that as well, because there are incentives obviously going forward to do projects in that as well. And I think, you know, making sure that someone who's doing a project, that they're aware of all the incentives that are available, and can we be creative within this township to create some incentives somehow, whether it be through permit fees or development charges or whatever the case may be. Can we work with them that way to help incentivize to be more sustainable?
Thanks, Sean. Tova?
There's an awful lot going on in the green buildings and green building standards, and how can you get these in place and what's allowed, and how can you give, you know, accelerated processes and all that kind of stuff, because the government says that you can't do bonusing, but you could do things like, different setbacks, for example, for thicker walls that have more insulation, or smaller parking spots mean you can get more units in a space or something like that. So there is some work happening there, but I think you're right, John, like it has to be done in an integrated way. Back to the SDGs, that's when I put my hand up, was for the SDGs. The challenge with the SDGs is that I think, as I understand how the staff report is done, and I've never had to create one, so if I'm wrong, please let me know, is that you have to say it impacts these 3 or these 5 or whatever. And that creates the age-old issue of social change movements of, okay, so we are looking at the impact on childhood development and equity, but it doesn't consider sustainability. And the beauty of the goals is that the 17th says that you have to work on all of them in partnership. That's why the 17th is the partnership of the goals. But having a way that what it does is, if staff just say it works on these 3, it means that you're actually pitting them against each other, saying, well, we're not going to worry about environment because we're dealing with childhood development, where the intention of the goals is that you can only have good childhood development if they're in a safe and healthy environment, for example. And so it's I think using them is great, but the implementation is difficult because it's not meant to be a trade-off, or it's not meant to be a checkbox to say, we've accomplished something. This one is good enough to move forward because it helps with these things. How you do that, I don't have the answer, but to that question of like, can it do what we're hoping? I don't know what the mechanism would do to do that. And the suggestion of adding something about what is the environmental and sustainability impact of this request or proposal is somewhat nebulous, and it opens the door to what is the childhood development, what is the, like you could actually have so many of those on a report, it could become ridiculous. And I don't want to paint that, that slippery slope for the staff being like, oh my gosh, I hate all of the people on the advisory committee because now we've got all these extra things to consider and I don't know how my tractor factory implements childhood development. So I can see the sides of this. I think what I'm hearing from the conversation is that there is some appetite for this committee to take something like this on, and there's further conversation needed, that we actually could potentially come up with an innovative way to bring it forward without becoming a thorn in the side of the staff or the counselors.
Thanks, Tova. Councillor Fanning?
Yeah, thank you for that, Tova. I really appreciate that, because absolutely, you know, the last thing on earth I want to do is make staff's life miserable. um, what I'm wondering is, you know, what you said, Leslie, about a culture shift. And if people who are having to work with this don't really understand the goals, and you know, just it's never been explained, or, you know, if you are not trained on a tool, how are you supposed to use it? So maybe the first thing we do is ask for all staff who are writing reports to have a training session so that they understand how to effectively use this, and it becomes a tool that's positive instead of another thing I have to check off, and you know, that I don't really understand, but well, I think this impacts this, so here we go. You know, which is again, it gets to being a negative thing for people instead of positive, which is what we really hope it will be. You know, we want to be talking about how we make our community better with everything we do, right? So do you think that would be something, and I mean, I have no idea, and maybe Tova, you've got some idea where some training on that might come from, or what that might look like. And, you know, how many staff are really considering, you know, how much is that training going to cost? And is Ashton going to, you know, want to send me terse emails later?
I'll have a quick comment on that. Not the terse emails, but as far as the training session, I think I've been making notes throughout all those conversations, and good points have been brought up. You know, as the training session one, I'll definitely take back to you know, to my director, and just for them to evaluate and hear that feedback. As far as like, you know, Leslie had an example. She doesn't write reports frequently, but she has a pretty big one coming up, and you know, and she asked me the questions about the goals. So, you know, perhaps some education behind that would certainly help individuals articulating the reports. Tova, go ahead.
Just an offer from and a highlight of something from SWR. We actually have an SDGs event coming up. So it won't be really deep, and like, it won't go into the, like, how do you actually do this for a council report for municipality, but it will have some more high level stuff. And of course, as members, the township is welcome to come to that. I think it's happening in September, but I can get the date for you once I have it confirmed. The other thing is that there is a group, a sustainable development goals group at the University of Waterloo, that thinks about how does a university implement the sustainable development goals, and I could connect you to them. They might have some good resources for this sort of thing. The other one is, of course, B Labs, which is the tool that we use, and the Impact Network at Sustainable Waterloo Region, but that's a tool that potentially could be used and referenced in some way. So happy to help him bring some of those resources. And even if staff can't come to the event, there'll be a recording of it, which could be shared among the staff to give some even first baseline of what is this that you're asking us to do.
Great, excellent, Tova. Thanks for that. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that event. Okay, so as far as, I guess, maybe looking towards you, Councillor Fenning, as far as the discussion pieces, any other, I guess, expectations from the committee itself at this point, or, you know, putting it on for further discussion, perhaps when Harold's here, or if you have conversations offline with him about that?
So I will certainly follow up with him offline. I have already touched base with him and told him, go away, you're on holidays, we'll talk when you're not. Because I don't want to, you know, that's a sustainability thing for him on a personal level. I guess my ask to the committee is whether this is a conversation that the committee is interested in pursuing. I personally would like to pursue it with the committee. If not, if the committee feels like it's just not something we want to take on, then that's okay. I will pursue it in another manner. There is going to be a request from one of the green building code groups coming to council at some point. I don't know what that timeline is, and I'm not sure that this necessarily I think my idea is something that's a bit broader, and so I think that it should be discussed separately, but with knowledge that that other piece is going to be coming. So that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. So is there anyone? Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here to say I think this has been a good discussion, a good first round of discussion, and I would be happy to see further deliberation on it. I don't know if a next step might be for Jen and Tova to work together on some sort of simple proposal or so forth that could come back to us. That might be a step forward. I'm not saying that's what you need to do, Jen, but it's just a suggestion.
All right.
I'd be happy to do that if that's what the committee would like to do. That would be a pleasure, no problem.
Okay. I guess maybe looking at the other committee members as far as kind of in agreeing with Jen on her proposal. Yep. Yeah, I agree certainly, but certainly further discussions with probably others at the table as well. Like we indicated earlier, Harold, and perhaps other staff as well from the impacts as well. But no, thanks for bringing that up, Council Fenning. That's great. Okay, so if there's nothing else further on that discussion, is there any other topics that committee members would like to bring forward?
No.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Fenning.
Sorry, I was waiting to see if anybody else had something because I feel like I've done a lot of talking. So Zero Waste Month is coming up in October, and that might feel like it's a long way away, but it's not. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, right, it flies. So can we maybe put that on the agenda for the next meeting? Oh boy, that's going to put us really close to October. Is it okay if we talk about it a little bit right now, and perhaps we can follow up with some email conversation about details?
Yeah, we can quickly chat about it now, and then the next meeting is scheduled to be on the 8th, so we'll have about 3 weeks. But again, it is still kind of close. But yeah, maybe perhaps we can have a high-level discussion and things via email, or perhaps we can close up also at the upcoming meeting in September as well. Leslie, yeah, you have your hand up.
I volunteer to take that initiative on, so we can have a chat, but I can also just send emails out about what you want that to look like. And I think when I asked this question about Earth Week, is it going to be internal or just community-wide? Because I know originally this committee started off sort of an internal thing. And so this initiative then, is it going to be community-wide as well? Like sending out communications and things like that?
I think like for Earth Day, we kind of did a little bit of both, right? We shared with staff and also the public. So I would imagine perhaps we can follow kind of the same pattern.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
And thank you, Leslie, for volunteering for that.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. John?
I was going to say, like, can we get in touch with communications at the township then too, and have some things ready to go? I would say, like, certainly a community-wide thing, not just internally. And we must have some things from the past or last year, whenever we were doing these things, so we can, have things set that they're going to go out twice a week or whatever the case may be, and leading up to October as well, just so we're prepared.
Okay, so then perhaps, for Leslie, thanks for volunteering again. I guess Leslie can kind of gather that information and work alongside of communications, and then at the upcoming meeting, perhaps I can bring some of the items that you've been working on, even considering also you've communicated along the way, and then we can kind of recircle that event. Tova?
I just had kind of a fun idea. I know that October is zero waste month and it's the election. So one of the things I might have said is like, oh, we should get counselors to commit to zero waste something, but that's kind of tricky considering it's an election month. But wouldn't it, I think just one idea might be fun to try to get some of the senior leadership to say, oh, we're going to do this, do a like a waste-free test day or something. I've seen it where they actually put like a little bag on their belts and walk around, and every piece of waste that they gather, they have to carry with them. Could be a fun thing. And actually, you know, some of the people at the township are pretty fun, like the staff leadership, that kind of stuff. You could, I don't know if you could do it before or after the election. I don't know how those things work, but just an idea I had that it would be kind of a fun demonstration, like join so-and-so in, you know, demonstrating your waste. And if I can find it, there's a funny thing of a guy who actually saved all of his waste for a whole year, and he like walks around with these bags attached to him, and it really did drive him to be like, I better stop or I'm not going to be able to walk anymore. But kind of just some fun attention getting, leadership creating, the township is taking the lead, something. I don't know that that's the right way to do it, but I just had an idea and I thought I would share proactively for your consideration, Wesley.
Thank you, Tova. It's actually a fun idea. Councillor Fenning?
Yeah, ordinarily I would challenge all of council to zero waste or like, you know, the mason jar challenge. I mean, maybe we could do it for the first week of October. I don't, off the top of my head, I would have to look at my calendar to see what our committee council meetings are in October, because that would make a difference too, right?
Well, there won't be one on the 24th.
So it looks like we have one on October 3rd. And then there aren't any others in October, according to my calendar here, which is populated by staff and not me. So I'm assuming they know what they're doing. Which also, you know, kind of makes sense in the lead up to the election day, not to have a council meeting the day before or whatever. So October 3rd is a council meeting. I wonder if possibly I don't know, I could challenge them to it at the September meeting. Actually, there's one on September 26th. And if I challenge to them that day, and then we have a meeting the following week, so, you know, a week of the Mason Jar Challenge, that could work. And then we're kicking off Zero Waste Month, basically with reporting on our waste for a week. I also do love the idea of asking staff leadership if they would walk around with a bag. I think that's very funny. And I think, yes, we have some really great sports on the team. So, oops.
Okay, sounds good. So we've got that all set up. So is there any other further topics before we close up the meeting? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your participation and ideas and collaboration. All right. So we'll end it there. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Fenning. All right. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of the meeting. Have a great day.
See you, everybody.